Elias Pettersson, the next Vancouver Canuck on the move. Hey everyone, welcome to Off the Post. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Steve Simmons in Florida by way of Toronto and Patrick Johnston in Vancouver. Well, it was just over a month ago we did a video about whether Quinn Hughes would remain a Vancouver Canuck through the trade deadline, and of course a few days later he was dealt. So now the focus shifts to Elias Pettersson, who according to TSN's Darren Dreger is someone that the Canucks would be willing to move. Patrick, you got a chance to speak with Canucks president of hockey operations Jim Rutherford on Wednesday. What was your takeaway from that convo?
Well, everyone's available. It's not just Elias Pettersson. That was the impetus of the whole conversation. I just shot it to Jim, and he called me out and said, "Well, I'm not talking players, talking names, but with basically everyone, we're ready to move anyone." And the situation is that this is a rebuild, and it's going to take 2 or 3 years, and they need a bunch of young guys, and they've got a few young guys they do like. But I mean, the truth is that for all that, they have to hit a home run in the draft this year. They don't really have a young guy to build around. They've got a couple interesting younger defensemen, and they got an interesting prospect forward in Braden Coots, but none of them are guys that are going to be your next superstar, and they've got to find their next superstar. So this is at the very beginning of a process that Jim does not want to turn into a Buffalo Sabres situation where it takes more than a decade for the team to even look good. But certainly he knows that there's a big task in front of them, and he is ready to take it on. So he says.
So here's the fascinating thing for the league to look at and for the Canucks to look at. Half of the teams in the league are looking for a second line center. Everyone says, I need a second line center. The question is Pettersson the second line center you need if that's what he is now?
Yeah.
Because we've seen different versions of him, and we're not sure which version is the right one and which version will fit somewhere else in a nice way. But there was the beginning of his career when he was this player on the move. And you thought, wait until he hits his 20s and he's going to be great. And then he hit his 20s and he was great. And he had, 2 seasons in the 100-point range. And you thought, wow, this guy's something. And then, the last 4 years, not so good. And so it's like, well, who is he? Is he the great player? Is he the good player? And what can you get for him? And I figured out there's about 15 to 20 teams that have cap space that can work him in, because it's a funny kind of deal. A lot of money's been paid up front in terms of bonus money, so teams don't have to come up with as much money as you'd think to pick up Pettersson, but you have to come up with the cap space, because I think the cap hits 11.5 or right around there. But some years you only have to pay $4 million. So for teams that are cash poor and cap and have lots of room cap wise, it's not a terrible deal. It's a question of how much are you willing to give up? How much, do you have that you can move with? And if you're Detroit right now, if you're Boston right now, if you're one of these teams, you got a chance to make the playoffs or do some business in the playoffs. Does a Pettersson make you that much better, or does he give you what you need? And I think there's so many variables in all of this that I'm gonna leave it to the hockey brains to figure out how this all works out best. So if you trade him, you're not going to be very good without him. So depending on what comes back. But so it's not like you're moving this piece that it's not the 102-point guy from how many years ago that was, or whatever his stats said he was. He's not this guy that everyone is looking and saying, "Oh wow." He's a guy that everyone's looking at and saying, "Well, what's next for him, and where does he go from here?" And I think unless someone believes in him, if there's a guy that scouted him years ago, if the guy that knows of it, the general managers have lots of, people working for them that know lots of people.
Right.
And if somebody out there thinks this guy can really help us, and he can be the guy that can turn us from 70 points to 90 or whatever the number happens to be, then you're going to make that kind of deal. And in the Canucks situation, there's an advantage therein. The Western Conference stinks. There's a lot of bad teams in the Western Conference. The East is very different than the West. The East doesn't really have a bad team. The West has probably 5, maybe more. And the young teams that are just sort of coming together, the San Jose's and the Anaheims and these kind of teams. But there's a lot of garbage in the West. And so moving up isn't that hard. if you can make one or two deals of consequence, and Jimmy's capable of it. He's done it before. You make one or two deals of consequence, you get some enthusiasm, which is what Pettersson doesn't bring. You get some enthusiasm. It can change. Hockey's a funny game. Sometimes the best players don't win, as we've seen so far. Edmonton hasn't won a cup yet.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many sort of layers in the backstory of this, and which is, I mean, you mentioned Jimmy's done this before. The truth is, I mean, the thing about it though is that like he hasn't been in this kind of position in 30 years, right? Like he was in Hartford when he was first trying to build up that organization, and then they moved to Carolina. But like, by the time they get to Carolina, they're trending in the right direction, right? Like they're moving towards this team that was sure a surprise finalist in 2002, but like his team was pointed up. And this is that is something he's done, but it's been a long time, and he hasn't had to be quite in this position. He's been a finisher, right? All that time in Pittsburgh was trying to create a team that already had Crosby and Malkin and Fleury, like creating a team that was going to become a Stanley Cup winner as opposed to a contender, and not even what they are now. So that is the challenge. Obviously, big challenge on the rest of his staff. And like you mentioned the owner thing, like I'm not going to bore people with Vancouver history, but like, in 2014, Mike Gillis was ready to ship out Ryan Kessler, ready to ship out Alex Burrows. He'd already moved Luongo. He'd already moved Schneider, right? Like, there was a potential repositioning here, and at the last moment, the owner said, no, we're not doing this. So that specter, people in Vancouver know that story hangs in the background, that this has been talked about before, has been attempted before, and that ownership in the end didn't have the stomach for it then, apparently have the stomach for it now, but I think people are skeptical.
But if Jimmy's saying we're rebuilding, which he absolutely hates to do and say at the same time, if he's saying that, he's got approval from ownership. He's got approval to do this. And you talk, they need a superstar, right? 2 weeks ago, they had one. They traded him. They had one of the great players in the NHL, a top 10 player. They traded him. So you got to, when you do that, when you make the decision, we're going to trade our best player, then you've got to make this then work in the right way. You can't go half and half. You can't go half in. Going half in never works. No. And so there's a lot of work to be done with this franchise, and I'm not sure Rutherford is the age to be able to do what needs to be done in the amount of years it's going to take to do it, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a big task, and listen, he's doing well in life, but he's also 77, and he's like I'm saying someone else. My dad's the same age. My dad walks all over town. My dad's doing great, but I know one day that's not going to be the case, and he will keep working, I think, as long as he can. But whether that's that's why he said he wants to do this in 3. He doesn't want to do this 6 to 10. He knows even the truth for him is that 6 to 10 years left in hockey may not be there.
If I'm doing this at 77, take a gun and shoot me.
Patrick Johnston, Steve Simmons, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching Off the Post, and we'll talk to you on the next one.